everybody, it's Mel. Thank you so much for joining me and Shade, if you can see her little face there, for March and April's reading wrap-up. So, as you are no doubt aware, in the middle of March, I decided to take a little bit of a break from YouTube, so I did not post a wrap-up for March or April as of yet, and so I thought I would combine the two, particularly given that I didn't read a huge amount in March anyway. As you can see, we're accompanied by Shade today. If you can hear her purring, which you very likely can, I apologise. That's just, how cats do. And also, if you can hear the noise of my heater, I apologise again. I'm feeling really cold today. It's not even that cold. It's like 15 degrees, but I'm just feeling really cold. So the heater's on. Also, just in terms of, I feel like I'm not very well kind of made up today. I feel like I'm just super casual in terms of what I look like and like what I'm wearing and no jewellery and all the rest of it. So, I hope that doesn't bother anyone. But that's what we're going with today. Anyway, as I was saying, this is going to be a wrap-up for both March and April this year. So I have been starting with my stats in the monthly wrap-up. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you stats for both months. We will try not to be really long, because even though I say I didn't read that many books in March, I do tend to waffle on a bit in my wrap-ups, and we do have like 9 books to talk about or something like that. So let's just dive straight into the stats and then we'll take it from there. So I have my reading journal and I have my yearly stats page where I've been keeping track of all the different things I want to keep track of this year. So for March, I read 4 books and that gave me a page count of 1,657. So as you can see, not a huge amount of reading happened in March. I didn't read any teaching books in March. I don't know if that's actually going to happen this year after all that, but I'm going to talk about my goals in a different video that will be coming up in end of June, beginning of July. Of those 4 books, 1 had LGBTQIA+ rep. 1 was written by a BIPOC author. I didn't read any books written by an Australian author or an Indigenous Australian author, and I didn't read any books that were translated from another language into English. 2 of the books that I read I classified as non-European inspired. Of the 4, 2 were physical and 2 were ebooks. I didn't read any audiobooks in March. Didn't read any young adult or middle grade, and so all 4 were adult. Didn't read any comics or graphic novels. 2 of the books that I read were on my own TBR. And I didn't reread any books in the month of March, which is unusual for this year. Actually, I've been rereading quite a bit. I read 1 fantasy, no historical fiction, no historical fantasy, no science fiction or dystopian, 1 paranormal / fabulism, no contemporary or literary fiction, no romance. 1 book was dark academic, gothic horror. No books that I read in March were thrillers. None were non-fiction, none were classics. 2 DNFs. No 2 stars, no 3 stars. 2 4 stars, 2 5 stars. And my average rating for stars in March was 4.5. My average core pile rating was 8.4. So even though I did DNF 2 books, I did really well on the books that I actually read and got quite high ratings for that one. So that's amazing. So that was March. In April, I read 6 books, so doing much better in April, which gave me a page count of 2,572. Again, none of these books were teaching books. 3 of these books had LGBTQIA+ themes sort of in them. 2 books were written by BIPOC authors. Didn't read any books written by Australian authors or Indigenous Australian authors. None of the books I read were translated into English, and none of them this time were non-European inspired. 5 of the books I read were physical, 1 was an ebook, and no books were in audio form. I read no young adult, but I did read 1 middle grade. I read 5 adult books. None of them were comics or graphic novels. 1 was from my own TBR, and 4 were rereads. So there you go. Picking up again. 3 of the books I read in April were fantasy. None of them were historical fantasy. 1 was historical fiction. 2 were sci-fi or dystopian. None of them were paranormal or fabulism, or contemporary or literary fiction, or romance, or dark academia, or thriller or mystery. I didn't read any non-fiction and I didn't read any classics. I fortunately didn't have any DNFs in April. I didn't have any 2 stars. I did have 1 3-star, 2 4 stars, and 3 5 stars, which gave me a average rating of 4.4 stars, which is 7.1 in core pile. So those are all my stats for March and April. So I'm going to go through now and talk to you about the books that I read. I always do this in the order in which I put them into the journal, so it may not be it may not be in the order in which I finished them or read them, but that's how they end up. So starting with the DNFs, I did not finish Alone with You in the Ether by Olivie Blake. I just really couldn't connect to the characters, and yeah, it was very character based and I didn't really connect to the characters, so I just couldn't really form a connection to the book or care that much about the book, so I ended up DNFing it. I don't know how far I got. I think I got like 30% in or something like that. It was an okay effort, so, you know, that's how that goes. Then I DNF'd A Lesson in Vengeance by Victoria Lee. This one, again, I just found that I was kind of bored and I wasn't really getting along with the writing style, so I ended up putting it down. I didn't read as much of this one. I only read like, I don't know, 50 pages maybe, but I just couldn't, I just didn't really want to pick it up, and I just figured that's not a good sign, so I did not continue to pick it up. So those are my 2 DNFs. Don't have a huge amount to say about them because I didn't finish them. In terms of what they were about, Alone with You in the Ether, like I said, it's a bit of a character study, and it is about 2 people who meet each other and form a very unlikely connection, and that eventually, I think, blossoms into romance, but that's about as much as I know about the book since I didn't finish it. And then A Lesson in Vengeance is a kind of dark academia, paranormal style book. Again, I didn't get very far, so I'm not really sure, to be honest with you. Okay. Let's go into the books I did finish. The first of these that I want to talk to you about today is The Good House by Tananarive Due. This was my first book by Tananarive Due, and I read it as part of Bethany from Beautifully Bookish Bethany's book club for her Patreon. This was a horror novel. It was set in the sort of southern American states, and it was about a woman in her like 40s, I think, and it was about her going back to her house that is one that's been passed down to her from her grandmother, and there's all sorts of mystery surrounding the house and all sorts of kind of ghosty horror stories surrounding the house, and something terrible happened. Sorry, distracted by cats. Something terrible happened in the house. I think it was like 4 or 5 years prior to the book opening. It obviously badly affected this woman and her partner and their relationship. And then she goes back to the house. I can't really remember why. And we flick back and forwards between her grandmother when something happened with her grandmother, and then we flick to what happened with her family 4 or 5 years ago, and then we flick to present day. And yeah, it's supernatural horror, and that's all I'm going to say about it. I really enjoyed this one. I thought it was really well written. I gave this one 4 stars, and core pile it was 7.57. So like I said, I really enjoyed this one. It was quite eerie. Alright, so that was The Good House. Next up, I want to talk about my first 5-star of March, and that was The City of Brass by S.A. Chakraborty. So, like I said, I gave this one 5 stars. In core pile, it had 9. So this is a Islamic-inspired fantasy, and we start out in Cairo, in Egypt, but then we travel to a sort of supernatural city that is still within that same areas. They talk about travelling along the Euphrates River, so it's in that sort of area of the Middle East. But this city, Daevabad, is, it's a supernatural city where the jinn live. We follow a few different people We follow Nari, who is human. She's a thief and a con woman. One day she is performing a traditional ritual, and to her point of view, she's just faking it, but something happens and suddenly there's jinn and all sorts of different supernatural creatures around. And she is forced to flee with one particular jinn, and he decides to take her to Daevabad. His name is Dara, or his name is something longer than that, but they call him Dara. And then we also follow Ali, and Ali is the prince, the second son of the king of Daevabad. It's a fantasy about these characters, and there's magic and jinn and all sorts of things like that. I really enjoyed this one. I thought it was incredibly well written. I really liked the characters. I thought the world building was impeccable. I love the way that S.A. Chakraborty writes. I think she writes really interestingly, and just the way she puts things together and draws you the picture of what's going on is amazing. Her characters, like I said, are fantastic, and they work really well together. You can really get the sense of their relationships between each other and the way they're forming and the way that they feel about each other and the changes and etc. I am definitely going to be reading the next two in the trilogy. So the next one is Kingdom of Copper, and then we have Empire of Gold. I'm actually reading this as part of the Daevabad readalong, which is hosted by myself and Kim from Expedition Through Pages, Emily from Emily Beth Hall, and Manny from Reading with Manny. So I will link the information for that down below if you want to get involved. We were supposed to read Kingdom of Copper in April, and we ended up not. None of us, the hosts, actually picked it up in time for the live show. So we decided to make it that we would have the live show at the end of April. So people have either had March or April to read it. April or May, I should say, to read it. And then with the third one, what did I just say? Empire of Gold, we'll be reading that in June, July. So, yeah. Anyway, yeah, really great series, well, really great book. I'm assuming the rest of the series is going to be fantastic, so I'm really excited about that. So that was The City of Brass by S.A. Chakraborty, which I do have here, and I did not pick up and show you. That whole time I was talking about it, I would normally be holding a book, and this time I did not, but I do have it. It's this one here. So there you go. Editing Mel does not have to put in the picture of it. All right. The next book I also have here, so I will actually show you, is Starling House by Alix E. Harrow. This is the third book that I've read by Alix E. Harrow, and I have really, really enjoyed every single book that I've read by this author. I gave this one 5 stars as well. In Callpile, I gave it 9.14. I just thought it was fantastic. I love her writing style. There is something about the way that she thinks about things and looks at things and words things that I just really, really appreciate. Similar to S.A. Chakraborty, I like the way she writes relationships between people. This one is about someone called Opal. Yes. A young woman called, well, she's in her 20s, called Opal, and she lives in Eden, which is in the United States. It's kind of a small-ish town, and there is this house called Starling House that is a really mysterious, secretive house that people don't really know much about. They know it has a reputation for being a little bit sinister and weird things happening there, but they don't really know why, and yeah, it just has this reputation. And Opal ends up taking a job as a housekeeper for the current owner of the house, whose name is Arthur. And she starts to experience some really strange things because the house is really odd. And she starts to learn more about Arthur and what's actually going on in the house and in the surrounding area. Like I said, I really enjoyed this one. I love the atmosphere. I thought that the way that she described what was happening and the atmosphere and put everything together was just absolutely amazing. So yeah, I'm really glad I read this one. I really, really enjoyed it. I definitely feel like Alix E. Harrow has become an auto-buy/auto-read author for me. So yeah, there you go. Okay, and the final book that I read and finished in the month of March was Life, the Universe and Everything by Douglas Adams. This is the bind-up of all 5 books in the trilogy in 5 parts, and if you know, you know. So this is the 3rd book in the series. I don't really want to go into a huge amount of detail about what happens in the series. I feel like we've discussed this quite a bit on our live shows. So this was another book that I was reading for a different read-along, and that is the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy series read-along, which I am currently reading with Ren from the Reading Ren, Ashley from Ash's Adventures and Books, Chelsea from Chelsea Zhao, and Ashley Absurd. We are all the hosts, and other people have been joining us as well, obviously. And yeah, we've been discussing the fact that there isn't an overarching plot line so much. There are characters that travel through the books with you, and I guess you could argue that it's a book about Arthur Dent, but there is just, yeah, there is no one, like, it's not like the Daevabad trilogy. You don't start with one story and then it continues each book. They're all kind of their own kind of episodic adventures that the different people get up to. So it's set in space. Arthur Dent, in the first book, Arthur Dent living on the planet Earth, happily being human, and he discovers on one day that his house is about to be knocked down to make way for a bypass. But he also discovers, very shortly after discovering that the entire planet Earth is about to be destroyed to make way for a hyperspace bypass, and his best friend is actually an alien from Beetlejuice, not human like he thought. Instead of exploding with the rest of the planet, he is whisked off by Ford Prefect, his best friend, and Ford's little mechanical, I don't know how exactly it works, sonar, I don't know, little machine that is like a thumb so he can hitchhike. Yeah, so that's kind of where we start, and then we have a bunch of different adventures throughout the galaxy happening, and the Hitchhiker's Guide is like it sounds, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I really enjoyed Douglas Adams' writing style. I find him very funny. These books are science fiction but mostly humour, and I love the way he writes about the world. These books are satire about the world and the way we look at things and the way we live our lives, and I really enjoy that. I really, like I said, like his humour. I like the way he writes characters. So yeah, I had a really good time with this one. I gave it a 7.86, which is 4 stars as well. Might be 4.5 stars. I think that I coloured in my stars. I coloured in 5, but it's actually, I think, 4.5. But anyway, pretty high rating for that one. So those are all the books that I read in March, and let's now dive straight into April. So in April, I reread a trilogy that I'll talk to you about altogether. So I've reread the Farseer trilogy, and the first of these books is The Assassin's Apprentice. All of the books obviously are by Robin Hobb. Then we have Royal Assassin, and then we have Assassin's Quest. This is the Farseer trilogy, which is the first trilogy in the realm of the Elderlings, which is an overarching epic fantasy series which has a bunch of different smaller series within it that make up the story, and I reread them in April. What did I think of them? I love them. I absolutely love this series. I love Robin Hobb's writing style. I love her world building. I love the way she writes characters. I love the way that she destroys characters. I just love everything about the way that she writes these books. They are very character driven. If you are not a character driven reader, you may not enjoy them, but they do still have enough plot to keep you going. So I'll hold up the first book. So Fitz Chivalry is our main character in the Farseer trilogy. In this book, when he is a young boy, about 6 years old, he is brought by his maternal grandfather to the castle of Buckkeep, which is the main capital city, or the castle of the main capital city, of the Six Duchies, which is in this realm of the Elderlings. And he's brought to well, he's not actually brought, sorry, that's totally not true. He's not actually brought to Buckkeep. He's brought to a military outpost where one of the princes of the realm from Buckkeep is currently residing or camping, and he says, I've had enough looking after this kid, you need to take your turn. And it turns out that Fitzchivalry is the bastard son of the king-in-waiting, or the first prince of the realm, Chivalry. Basically, the grandfather leaves this 6-year-old with Chivalry's younger brother, Verity, and we follow Fitz as he is taken in by the Farseers and taken back to the castle. He is brought up by the stable master for quite some time, and then he's eventually brought into the castle and brought up by various different people in the castle, and he is secretly trained as an assassin. So that's why we have Assassin's Apprentice, because he's apprentice to assassin. And basically the series is about the Six Duchies, it is about the royal family, it is about a bunch of different battles and raids that are happening from another people of the world, and it's about the Six Duchies kind of falling apart, essentially, and how they try to fix it and how Fitz fits in with that. They also have 2 different kinds of magic, which one is considered to be kind of the king's magic and is very well revered, and one is not. It is a magic of beasts. It's called the wit, and people shy away from it, and it's not good if you have the wit. Basically means you can kind of talk to animals and form a bond with animals, hear what they're thinking, and they can hear you, etc. I was very, very happy to have finished the whole trilogy in the month of April. I do intend to pick up the next trilogy, which is the Live Ship Traders, hopefully soon, but I don't know if it'll fit in the next month or so, but we'll see how we go. So the entire series got 5 stars from me, so each book got 5 stars, and I didn't even write down what it ended up in the call pile, but it was high. It's like between 9 and 10. Alright, the next book that I read also is in this bind-up, is So Long and Thanks for All the Fish, again by Douglas Adams. This is the 4th book. It was originally the final book, but then he wrote another one. But anyway, this is the 4th book in the series. We follow Arthur Dent, just like I was talking about before, but obviously different things have happened and he's having different adventures, he's meeting different people. I was actually a little bit disappointed by this one. I still gave it 4 stars, and on Compile that's 7.43, so I still gave it a pretty high rating because I do love Douglas Adams' writing style. I do love his humour and the way that he, like I said, is a satirist of humanity. But I remember just loving this book and it being my favourite of the trilogy, of the series, and feeling like it wrapped up more of the story than it did. But yeah, I was disappointed because it actually didn't end up being that. So I don't know what my brain was doing, but yeah, I was a bit disappointed. I did enjoy the book, like I said, but obviously overall I enjoy the book because I gave it quite a high rating, but yeah, a little bit disappointed. Again, I'm not going to go into detail about what's going on because it's the 4th book in the series, but it is the 4th book in Douglas Adams' humorous, satirical, sci-fi space opera. So yeah, that's that one. Next up, I read a book which I do own, but I don't appear to have grabbed it. So we'll just have to insert an image. Anyway, that book is called Esperanza Rising, and it was written by Pam Munoz Ryan. This one is a story, it's a middle grade story, and it's historical fiction. We follow a young girl, I think she's supposed to be around 12 or 13. She is Mexican, she lives with her parents in Mexico. She is from a very rich family. Her father owns a bunch of different vineyards, and she's well off, she has servants, and she's used to a certain style of life. And then one day, this is not a spoiler because I'm pretty sure it says it on the back, one day her father dies and suddenly her world is very much kind of turned upside down. Her mother inherits the home, but I don't think inherited the vineyards. But it's kind of one of those situations where she is a woman, and so it's not really necessarily considered a good thing for her to have control of the property. So even though she owns the home, it's kind of like in trust with her partner's brother and Esperanza's uncle, obviously. And the uncle basically says, well, now you have to marry me. And they're not really in a position for that to be something that she can not do, but she really doesn't want to do that, so they escape to America and suddenly Esperanza is thrown into a whole new life. She no longer has any of the money or position or power or style of life that she's used to. She ends up living on this refugee camp where they live with the farmers on this camp in the kind of like in the farming area, and they're a bunch of different, they're employed essentially to harvest all the different crops when the crops are ready to be harvested. And Esperanza finds herself in a position where she has to work, and she's not used to that, and it's about that. It's about growing up, it's about figuring out your way, adapting to change of circumstances, change of home, all of that sort of thing. I really enjoyed this one. I thought it was very well written. It's middle grade, as I said, so it's probably written a bit more simply than maybe than an adult book would be written that is of a similar storyline, but I thought it was really well written for children. I think children will get a lot out of it. I think they would really understand that it would explain what children go through and what happens when like what can happen to refugees and what that life is like and those sorts of changes and how that affects people and etc. Like I said, I thought it was really, really well done, and yeah, I definitely think it's a book that children would get a lot out of. I gave it a 7.14 in Corpile, which is 4 stars. And then the final books that I read in the month of April was Leave the World Behind by Rumaan. I gave this one 3 stars. In Corpile it's 6.5. I'm not sure whether or not it realistically is 3 stars. I feel like it might be more of a 2.5 stars. There were aspects that I liked about it, but overall I didn't particularly enjoy the book. So I did think the writing was very good. I did think that, again, the way that he structured the story and told the story was really, really well done. I didn't connect particularly to the characters, but I don't think we were really supposed to. I guess this is an apocalyptic book, but the apocalypse is happening off screen, as it were. You never find out what is actually happening. So we start out, we're following this family, and it is a man and a woman and their 2 children, and they live in New York, and they decide that they need to have a holiday. So they book this Airbnb, really fancy sounding house, really beautiful in the middle of nowhere on Long Island. I don't really know anything about New York, so I don't know how you can get the middle of nowhere on Long Island, but apparently that you can. I've always pictured the whole area as being like Manhattan, like really built up, but I don't know. Anyway, so kind of country, it's quite secluded, etc. So they go there, and the first couple of days they have a great time, and then I think it's the second night. It's relatively late at night, and there's a knock on the door, and these 2 people at the door, and they claim that they are the owners of the house and that there was a blackout in New York City, the whole of New York. Their home in New York is up like 14th floor or something like that, and a high rise, and so they're an older couple. They don't necessarily want to climb stairs, and the elevators wouldn't be working anyway because the blackout. So they decide that the best thing to do is actually to drive out to their home on Long Island, and because they're black, the owners of the house, the older couple, and the 2 that are staying, the family that are staying, are white. The implication in the story is that the white family that are staying there don't really believe that the couple are who they say they are, because, I mean, it's all a bit weird, but partly because they're black. And it's like a really, really amazing house, and it's obviously owned by really rich people. So anyway, they're there, and it's quite late at night as well. It's all very suspicious circumstances, and they're talking about this blackout, and there's the house that they're currently in, the holiday home that the people are renting. There's power there. So they were a bit like, what? I don't understand what's going on. Anyway, they convince them to let them in, and they come in, and there's a lot of tension between them. They say, well, the internet's not working. So anyway, then they realise, the younger couple who are renting realise that actually that's true. They don't have the internet's not working. They can't get internet on their phone. They can't update social media. They can't get news, etc. They try to turn the TV on. Same thing. But yeah, they don't know what's going on. There's a blackout. There's no internet, but that's it. Their house is not really affected. They still have all the things that they need. They decide to let this couple stay, and then over the next few days they start to experience some odd things going on. They see strange things in the area, and they start to kind of realize that something's happening and start to try to figure out what to do about that. You do get hints throughout the book of what is going on in New York and other parts of the world, but you don't ever get told what's actually happened. You never find out whether it's a terrorist attack, whether it's the beginning of a war, whether it's a pandemic. Whether it's a zombie, like, you just never find out what it is. And I found that really, really frustrating. And the book just kind of ended. Like, I didn't feel like it wrapped anything up. It didn't feel like it left off at a place where, like, it makes sense to end. It just kind of ended. But I think the point of the book was about having that constant access to news sites, to social media, to our friends, to Snapchat, to all of this sort of stuff, that constantly being able to look at what's going on and finding out what's going on and hearing different versions of stories and etc., etc. And that idea of not knowing how to deal with not knowing what's going on, and this strange sense of something sinister happening, but you don't know what the thing is and who can you really trust. And yeah, I think that was kind of the point of it, but I'm still not really sure. Didn't love it, but I read it. So those are all the books that I read in the months of March and April. So that's it. That's the end of the video. Let me know in the comments below if you've read any of the books that I talked about today, what you thought of them. Please, if you have an explanation for what was happening in Leave the World Behind, please let me know. But yeah, in general, if you've read any of these books, what you thought of them. If you'd like to leave me a comment but you don't know what, then leave me, if there is, a deer emoji, because deer are a important thing in Leave the World Behind, and one of the covers, which is the one that I actually have in the journal here, has deer on the cover. So leave me a deer emoji if you can find such a thing. And if you can't, then leave me just some kind of book stack or whatever emoji. All of my social media details are listed in the description below, so if you'd like to go and follow me on any of those other platforms, please feel free to do so. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, I would absolutely love it if you would subscribe to my channel and give this video a thumbs up. And yeah, like I said, thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you next time.